At 1233, continental Spain and Portugal lost electricity, not a neighborhood, not a city, almost the entire Iberian mainland system. Then grid operators received an instruction that sounds simple: restart it. But a dead grid creates an almost absurd problem. Most large power stations need electricity before they can make electricity. Their controls, pumps, cooling systems, and fuel equipment need power first. So where does the first usable megawatt come from? And why could a load change lasting 25 seconds erase hours of progress? ENTSO-E's final investigation reconstructs the restoration almost switch by switch. It reveals that countries are not restarted, they are regrown. First, one boundary. The blackout itself had interacting causes, including oscillations, voltage control gaps, output reductions, and cascading generator disconnections. This story begins after the collapse, when every solution depends on something the blackout has just removed: a stable electrical reference. Under normal conditions, a plant draws station power from the grid to run the machinery that prepares its generator to spin. Kill the grid and that loop breaks. A generator may contain enormous energy, yet still lack the small supply needed to unlock it. A black start resource breaks the loop. It can begin without outside grid power and establish voltage where, moments earlier, there was none. Think of a starter motor, except the engine is a network spanning hundreds of kilometers, and every new connection can destabilize it. The sequence is deliberate. Start a self-sufficient unit, energize a bus in line, then create a path toward another plant. Engineers call that route a cranking path. Power travels along it to wake the auxiliaries of generators that cannot start alone. Add a little demand, bring in another generator, extend another line. The energized patch becomes an electrical island inside the blackout. Several islands can grow in parallel. Eventually, operators connect them until the islands become one interconnected system again. But every island must continuously balance generation and demand. There is almost no room for a careless step. Connect too much load and the machines slow, pulling frequency downward. Lose too much load and they accelerate, pushing frequency upward. Energizing an unloaded transformer can also produce a sharp electrical disturbance. Protection systems may interpret danger and disconnect the only working unit. That means operators are not merely turning equipment on, they are keeping a tiny, newly born grid alive while making it larger. Iberia's restoration used two strategies at once. The first was top-down, borrow stable voltage from a healthy neighboring system. The second was bottom-up, start local plants with black start capability and build isolated pockets outward from them. These two strategies would race across the peninsula for 7 hours. The dangerous moment would come when their different electrical worlds had to meet. Spain's mainland plan divided the network into 7 areas, each assigned at least 2 black start hydro plants, including a backup. Portugal's Iberian blackout plan began with 2 anonymized resources, 1 hydro plant in the center and 1 gas plant in the north. Operators split into 2 teams, 1 for each Portuguese island. Both teams were trying to manufacture stability from zero. At 12:43, just 10 minutes after the collapse, France energized a 400 kilovolt interconnection and began Spain's northern top-down recovery. At 12:55, a hydro unit in Extremadura black started. At 13:00, another began building the first Douro island. At 13:04, Morocco supplied voltage into southern Spain, with support agreed up to 100 megawatts through a submarine cable. Even the outside lifeline was fragile. It disconnected at 14:27 after an issue in Morocco, then returned 7 minutes later. Meanwhile, bottom-up islands kept appearing and collapsing. Extremadura tripped, Douro tripped, and East Asturias attempt tripped before forming its island. Freeze the map here. A failed island was not proof the plan was useless. It was proof that the fallback layers mattered. When a local attempt failed near a stable corridor, operators could abandon the island and restore that area from the stronger system instead. Portugal showed why those local attempts were so difficult. Its center hydro unit entered black start mode at 12:45. 4 minutes later, connecting a 170 megavolt ampere transformer triggered maximum voltage protection on the plant's low-voltage auxiliary bus. The unit disconnected. The auxiliary hydro units then could not reset correctly. A diesel unit had to energize the low-voltage bus before another serious attempt. The center plant restarted at 1540, tripped again at 1555, and finally established a new restoration area at 1630. In northern Portugal, the gas plant initially could not close its generator breaker because of an unexpected control system interlock. Engineers identified and modified the interlock. At 1638, nearly 4 hours after the request, the northern gas unit finally energized its bus. The island grew toward Porto. Then, at 1723, Operators started a hydro unit as a synchronous compensator to help control voltage. Its auxiliary suddenly consumed about 17 megawatts. That extra load pulled the island from 50 Hz down to 49.7. The gas plant operator changed control mode to arrest the slowdown. For a moment, the response appeared to work. 25 seconds later, that 17 megawatt demand vanished. The gas generator accelerated and its overspeed protection disconnected it from the island. The machine itself remained running on its own house load, and the switchyard was re-energized minutes later, but the young island had collapsed. This is the black start paradox in miniature. Every new device helps rebuild the grid, yet every connection can destroy the grid you have. At 1726, northern Portugal formed its restoration area again. Now both Portuguese islands could resume their careful expansion. Spain was also far from whole. At 1530, the restoration map showed many separate areas and only 1,952 megawatts of load supplied. Levante's island tripped at 1603. Cantabria's followed 3 minutes later. Both areas were then recovered from nearby stable zones. At 1654, Spain's France-fed northern zone successfully synchronized with the Aragon island. One fragment had joined the continental rhythm. Synchronization is not plugging in an extension cord. Voltage, magnitude, frequency, and phase angle must all be close enough at the breaker. The two Douro islands could not align their frequencies. After repeated attempts, operators disconnected Douro 1 at 1701. At 1749, Douro 2 synchronized with the northern zone instead. Supplied load had climbed to 5,565 megawatts. The fragments began joining faster. At 1816, southern Spain synchronized with the Extremadura 2 island, extending power toward Madrid. At 1836, Spain energized a 220 kilovolt tie into Portugal. Continental European frequency had finally entered the Portuguese system. Portugal now had 3 electrical worlds: its center hydro island, its northern gas island, and a third area connected through Spain. At 1832, just before that connection, the Portuguese map showed only 120 megawatts of load supplied. The hard part was still balance. Spain's France-fed north met its Morocco support at south at 1932. 21 minutes later, the eastern zone joined, creating one mainland restoration area. Portugal's center island synchronized with the Spain-connected area at 2001. The northern island followed at 2022. This was the dangerous meeting we left open. Separate grids, each alive on its own, matched closely enough to become one without collapsing. Once every Portuguese area shared the larger European rhythm, restoration accelerated. Automatic generation control began matching Portuguese generation to load at 2025. Main load restoration in Lisbon began at 2057. A fourth Spain-fed area opened in Algarve and Alentejo at 2135. At 2319, that southern area merged with the rest. At 022, Portugal's transmission grid restoration was complete, supplying 4,237 megawatts. Spain kept rebuilding generation behind its united network, 13 thermal plants by 2120, and 14,760 megawatts of load supplied by 2233. Load frequency control started after midnight. Renewable, cogeneration, and waste facilities were progressively cleared to return from 138 onward. Around 400, Spain reported 100% of its transmission network restored about 16 hours after the blackout began. Transmission restored does not mean every customer recovered at that instant. Load and local distribution service returned in controlled stages. Portugal's transmission grid took about 12 hours. Spain's took about 16. The final report calls both times comparable with other major restorations. No single heroic machine restarted Iberia. Stable neighbors, self-starting plants, precisely chosen loads, protected auxiliaries, and human coordination formed a temporary scaffold. The failures mattered too. Breaker interlocks, protection settings, weak measurements, and lost voice communications all slowed parts of the recovery. That is why the report recommends live black start tests, joint training, blackout-proof communications, and better high-resolution data, not merely more generating capacity. The answer to how do you restart 2 countries is start smaller than a country. Hold one island steady, then grow it until the map reconnects.